Hello children, I'm Ravichandra from Sri Chaitanya, and the exam got cancelled, and that was something which was not in our hands. And people who are weak-hearted, not you, got drained, got exhausted, got disappointed. But all of you understands properly that the exam got cancelled, but not your abilities, not your hard work. In fact, you are far better placed now to face the NEET re-exam, which is on 21st of June. The reason? Not only you have answered many grant tests, you also answered the most important NEET exam on 3rd of May. So now you know the experience. Now you know what type of mistakes you should never do. So that experience is something which is very enriching. And I'm pretty sure that you'll be writing this exam next month with a greater vigor, with greater concentration, and with a wonderful result. So without getting disappointed, concentrate for this 1 month and see that you excel, you do better than what you did for the exam which was held on 3rd of May. So today we are going to start a series of chapters according to the schedule which is given to you. And the first chapter in that is Living World. This chapter, one question was asked on 3rd of May exam with regard to the nomenclature rules. Very deceptive chapter. It looks like as if it is a very small, unimportant chapter. But mind you, you should be careful about this chapter because 1 or 2 questions are always asked from this. Without wasting any time, we'll get into this chapter, Living World. Now, what we are going to see is the concept of living world now, and we'll be talking about some of the important areas with regard to this chapter called Living World. Now, the first in that list is about Darwin. He is called, Mayr. He is called Darwin of 20th century. Why Darwin of 20th century? Simply because Origin of Species is a book written by Darwin. And this man also talked about the concept of species, a group of individuals with morphological similarities, responsible or which can freely interbreed is a species. Because he gave the definition of species or talked about the species concept, that is the reason why he is called Darwin of 20th century. There are some other points which you have to remember. He earned the title. Remember the title? He also worked on subjects like taxonomy, evolution, systematics, ornithology, zoogeography, history and philosophy of biology. These are the points which you have to remember with regard to Darwin. Then, inanimate matter, all of you know it's a non-living. Water, wind. Animate matter means which is living. The textbook says man defied means worship, both inanimate and animate matter. There is one word called anthropocentric, human-centric. You heard about in biotechnology. René Descartes said any science should be anthropocentric, human-centric. It should help humans to have a better life. Then the most important, biggest spin-off, the meaning of spin-off is consequence of taxonomic studies, is that all present-day organisms share similarities horizontally, means related to each other, and also vertically. Now, what is the meaning of horizontal similarities? Similarities among organisms of the same taxonomic level. I gave a nice example here. Say, for example, all organisms in class Dicots share these common features. All organisms, all plants under Dicots will have a taproot system, will have reticulate venation, will have tetramerous or pentamerous flowers, 2 cotyledons in seed, non-endospermic seeds, etc. Means all organisms are going to show a lot of similarities among each other, therefore horizontally. They resemble horizontally. Then vertical similarities refer to similarities seen across different taxonomic levels in a hierarchy. Here I took an example of humans. All of you know, it belongs to kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Primate. At each level, humans share characteristics with other organisms. Say, for example, at chordata level, presence of notochord and dorsal nerve cord. At a level of mammalia, at a class level, hairs and mammary glands, etc. That is the meaning of the fact that organisms share similarities horizontally and also vertically. The technical meaning of life is complex physico-chemical processes, and the philosophical meaning of life is what is the purpose of living. You are too younger at this point to get into the thick of philosophical meaning. Next, most important, characteristic, unique, fundamental features of organisms. So if you say this is a living organism, what are the characters that organism has to have? Growth, reproduction, metabolism, consciousness, interactions, and cellular nature. If these are the characters seen in living organisms, you say that they are fundamental, distinct, unique characters of living organisms. Having said that, this word is very important. What is the meaning of defining feature of living organism? I have clearly written here, observed in all living and never observed in any non-living. That is the meaning of defining features. Intrinsic growth, be careful, not growth. Growth is not a defining feature because even non-living things grow. Intrinsic growth is seen only in living organisms. So that can be an example for defining feature. Metabolism, cellular nature, consciousness, but not self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is seen only in humans, aware of themselves. All right, so therefore you can't call it a defining feature. Consciousness and interactions. So these are all said to be defining features because they are observed in all living organisms and never observed in any non-living. So you should never get confused between fundamental features and defining features of living organism. Now we talk about growth. What is the meaning of growth? An irreversible permanent increase in mass and number is said to be growth. An irreversible permanent increase in mass and number. What should be the condition for growth? Anabolism should be more than catabolism. Now listen carefully. First of all, you're going to ask me, do non-living things grow? The answer is yes. A sand dune is going to form when all the sand particles accumulate and form a large mass. Is it growth? Yes. Why it's growth? Because it's an irreversible permanent increase in mass. Therefore, it is growth. But what type of growth it is? It is extrinsic growth because the materials are added on the existing ones. Therefore, it is not a growth from within. Therefore, it's an example for extrinsic growth. Then I'm going to put a question. Wood swelling and sponge swelling, can I call it as growth? The answer is no. Why? Because it doesn't fit into the definition of growth. Growth means an irreversible increase in mass. Sponge doesn't show an irreversible increase in mass. If I put it in water, no doubt it is going to swell. After some time, the water is lost. So therefore, there is a decrease in mass. So therefore, sponge and wood do not properly fit into the definition of growth. Then, growth in living, I already told you, it is intrinsic, an increase in mass. Unicellular organisms. What type of growth is seen in unicellular organisms? Here, growth and reproduction are synonymous. If a bacteria is dividing, I mean to say that bacteria is also reproducing. If I say bacteria is reproducing by binary fission, I also mean that it is dividing, it is showing growth. So in all unicellular organisms, that is in monorans and protistans, growth and reproduction are synonymous or inclusive one each other. It is similar to each other. Then we talk about plants and animals. In plants, what type of growth is seen? Intrinsic. I already told you, living organism shows intrinsic growth. Within this intrinsic growth, is it indeterminate growth or determinate growth? You know pretty well, children. Indeterminate. I don't want to talk few things elaborately because at this point, you know pretty well. Intrinsic and indeterminate. Thanks to apical meristems at the tip of root and stem, thanks to lateral meristems, the plant is going to increase in its height and diameter for infinite amount of time. Therefore, we say that growth in plants is not only intrinsic but indeterminate. What about in animals? Growth in animals is no doubt intrinsic, but it is going to stop after some time because it doesn't have any meristems. Therefore, we say that it is determinate. Surely dead organisms doesn't grow. And is it a defining feature? Already I told you it is no, because it is not, it is observed even in non-living things. Growth at, this is the 1 or 2 points I picked up from other chapter, which is also a part of your syllabus. So growth at cellular level is increase in protoplasm. That cannot be measured because increase in protoplasm is difficult to measure. We take other parameters as a criteria to understand the increase in protoplasm. It could be increase in number, size, length, and surface area. And what are the phases of growth? Meristematic phase, the cells keep on dividing. Elongation phase, the cells stop dividing and accumulate water, increase in volume, turgidity. Then maturation phase, maximum cell wall thickenings are seen here. So these are the phases which can be seen, clearly seen in the root tip. So therefore, these are the different phases of growth. Then we talk about growth rates, arithmetic and geometric. If the growth is uniform, one cell divide and other cell become permanent. And if this phenomena continue, that is said to be arithmetic. Uniform increase in size of root and size of the stem is wonderful example for arithmetic growth. Coming to geometric, every cell divide and it increases exponentially. Look here, 1 becoming 2, 2 becoming 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. Look at root apical meristems, root at shoot apical meristems. Every cell they divide. So therefore, it's a wonderful example for geometric growth. And majority of organs, cells and tissues in your body or in plants can also exemplify geometric growth because initially the growth is slow. Later it exceeds, then it drops. So the geometric growth is mostly observed in majority of cells, tissues, and even organisms growing under natural environment. At that point, you know it. Conditions for growth, all of you know, water, responsible for turgidity, nutrients for synthesis of protoplasm, oxygen, release of metabolic energy, light, bending of stem tip towards light is due to oxygens, and gravity. Look here, what we have done now is we have added few points about growth from other chapters also into this. This is the holistic way of looking at this chapter, children. All right, so at this point, you have to get into this kind of mode of learning things. That makes your job more easier. Now we go to reproduction. The meaning of reproduction is ability of an organism to perpetuate, all right, or produce young ones is said to be reproduction. And it could be sexual or asexual. In sexual, you call the progeny as offspring. In asexual, you call that progeny as clone, naturally because they resemble the parent. Asexual reproduction is most commonly seen in lower organisms, is exact replica of the parent. And sexual reproduction, offsprings are more or less similar to parent. It is not exact replica, more or less similar to parent, and it is more complex and observed in higher. Do non-living things reproduce? Doesn't reproduce. No. Viruses can replicate, all right, but non-living things doesn't reproduce. That's an important point. And viruses can replicate only inside the host, not outside. Living, most of them reproduce. All living organisms reproduce, I can't say, but most of them are going to reproduce. Exceptions are worker bees and mules. That is the reason why reproduction is not a defining feature. I already discussed, children, with regard to bacteria. Now, I think there's a big list I gave it. Let me show you this list a little later. Before that, just listen to what I'm saying. If you look at the 5 kingdoms of Whitaker's classification and talk about the 2 types of reproduction very fast. Bacteria. Asexual reproduction is by binary fission or endospores, bacillus, based on the diagram in your textbook. And sexual reproduction is a primitive type of DNA transfer, conjugation, transformation, and transduction from one bacterium to another. No gametes formed, no zygote formed. Gametes and zygote is first time seen from members of Protista, not in Monera. Then coming to Protista, asexual reproduction is by binary fission, or sometimes even by multiple fission, as you see in amoeba. And sexual reproduction may be isogamy, anisogamy, or oogamy. First time gametes, first time zygote is seen in the members of Protista. Coming to fungi, vegetative reproduction is by binary fission or fragmentation, seen in yeast, only yeast. And asexual reproduction is with the different types of spores. Mind you, children, this is an important unit. Phycomycetes. Asexual spores are endogenous inside. They may be non-motile sporangiospores or motile zoospores. Ascomycetes and deuteromycetes. Asexual reproduction is with the help of conidiospores. And in basidiomycetes, asexual spores are generally absent. Then we talk about sexual reproduction in fungi. In Phycomycetes, you see the gametes formed, gametangial copulation, gametes fuse, zygospore is formed, also called oospore, reduction division, producing germ spores. So you see a proper sexual reproduction, plasmogamy, karyogamy, and meiosis. But when we go to Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes, it is a primitive type of sexual reproduction. At least in Ascomycetes, you see sex organs, antheridia and ascagonia, and the nuclei coming together. Whereas in Deuteromycetes, there is no sexual reproduction at all. So this is something which you have to remember with regard to reproduction in fungi. Coming to plants, children, the reproduction may be asexual or sexual. In alga, sexual reproduction may be isogamy, anisogamy, or oogamy, especially in green alga and brown alga, if not in red alga where you see oogamy very common. From bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, it is oogamy. And then if you ask me what are the asexual reproduction in plants, in higher plants, vegetative reproduction can be termed as asexual reproduction because the progeny are exact replica of the parent. Rhizome, corm, stem tuber, bulb, runner, offset, stolon, sucker, epiphyllous buds, and bryophyllum. They are all examples of asexual reproduction in plants. In animals, children, sexual reproduction is very common. Asexual reproduction occur in lower organisms. So these are the points with regard to reproduction which I have written here. All right, with regard to all, and you can easily go through this. In slime mold, sporulation, protozoans, binary and multiple fission, Phycomycetes, aplanospores and zoospores, Ascomycetes, conidiospores. All right, yeast, budding and binary fission is vegetative. Basidiomycetes, asexual reproduction is absent. Sexual reproduction is by basidiospores. Deuteromycetes, conidiospores are asexual, no sexual reproduction. In green alga, zoospores and aplanospores are asexual spores. Isogamy, anisogamy, and oogamy. Brown alga, zoospores are asexual spores. Here also you see isogamy, anisogamy, and oogamy, that is sexual. Red alga, non-motile, asexual spores, and oogamy is seen. Liverworts, gemme, they are multicellular green buds and markentia. Very popular question. All right, and oogamy is a sexual reproduction. Lateral buds and secondary protonema in Funaria. Secondary protonema are those protonema which develop from any detached part of gametophore. So that can directly develop into a new one. So therefore, that can also be an example for vegetative reproduction. Ferns, rhizome, ginger, rhizome, colocation, Amorphophallus, corm, potato, stem tuber, onion and garlic, bulb, bryophyllum, epiphyllous buds. Hydra is going to reproduce by budding. This point is important, planaria. Flatworm. Now, I have written an important point. What is the meaning of true regeneration? If it is cut into several fragments and each fragment can regenerate into a complex new individual, that is the meaning of true regeneration. If it is cut into many fragments and if each fragment is capable of developing into an entire organism, that is said to be true regeneration, that is seen in planaria. Lizards are capable to regenerate only in lost parts. So this is the difference between true regeneration and regeneration. Mules and worker bees, they do not reproduce. Viruses, they reproduce only inside the host. Very important. Is it a defining feature? The answer is no. Nice, children. What we have done is we brought some other topics. We just brought them together at this point in this unit called reproduction. Then we talk about next important topic called metabolism. What is metabolism? The sum total of anabolic and catabolic changes occurring inside a living organism is said to be a metabolism. What is the example for anabolic? Synthesis of proteins, photosynthesis are example for anabolism. What is an example for catabolism? Breakdown. Digestion is an example for catabolism. Respiration is an example for catabolism. These are the things which you heard many times. So therefore, let us not waste our time here. All right. Then, of course, respiration, I told you, is catabolism. That's a classical definition of catabolism. But now it is very clear that it is amphibolism now. All right. Criteria to show metabolism. Enzymes and other biomolecules need to be present inside the cell. So for metabolism to occur, cells are compulsory. So look, viruses doesn't have cells. Therefore, there is no metabolism in viruses. Inherent metabolism is absent. So when cells are there, enzyme machinery is there, all these reactions can occur one after the other. That is called metabolism. That's a very important point. So therefore, wherever cells are there, there you see metabolism. Cells are there in all 5 kingdoms of Whittaker's classification. Therefore, metabolism is also seen in all 5 kingdoms of Whittaker's classification. So is it a defining feature? The answer is yes. Now, one important point. All right, first listen to me, then we can see the board. What is the meaning of living reaction? Well, any reaction, all right, occurring, any metabolic reaction occurring inside the body or even outside the body or outside the cell is said to be a living reaction. I repeat again, a reaction which can occur inside the body or inside the living organisms or outside the living organisms can be called it as a living reaction. But inside the body, all these living reactions are properly coordinated and that forms metabolism. Outside the body, it is not. So therefore, living reactions inside the body constitute metabolism, whereas living reaction outside the body doesn't constitute metabolism. Say, for example, if I'm a fungus, I'm going to secrete an enzyme, digestive enzyme, digest the food outside, and if I take the digested food, that is said to be a living reaction occurring outside the body. Question you're going to ask me is, can I call it as living or non-living? Living reaction occurring outside the cell is not non-living. Why? Because after all, it is the enzyme of the cell which is helping in this process. Living reaction occurring outside the cell is not living. Why it is not living? Because it is occurring outside the cell. Simple way of saying, living reaction occurring outside the cell is neither living nor non-living. So I cannot justify as living or non-living because of the reasons which I have mentioned just now. So let us look at this. Metabolism occur inside the body, or sometimes these metabolic reactions may occur outside the cell. Example for living reaction occurring outside the body, just now I told you. In living reactions outside the cell living? No, as it occurs outside the body. Is living reactions outside the cell non-living? No, as it occurs in the presence of enzymes secreted by the cell. Metabolism keeps cell in non-equilibrium steady state, and that is said to be a living state. All metabolic reactions occurring inside the cell are catalyzed by enzyme. So nice. We have discussed this topic in the best possible way. In fact, we are understanding things better now. The reason is very simple, because you're concentrating more, and added to that, you're more experienced now. When experience is more, understanding ability also gets enhanced. So it's not that something great is happening here. So you have more experience, so you can understand things in a better way. Then we talk about the next important one called consciousness. Ability to respond to stimulus is said to be consciousness. Very simple. All right. Now, say for example, you heard about Darwin's experiment. When light falls on this side, more organisms move to the shaded side and bend towards light. Stimulus is light, and stem tip bending towards light is said to be response. And what should I call that stimulus as? A physical stimulus. Look here. If I'm a bacteria, now I'm not a stem tip now, bacteria. If there is plenty of sugars, I like sugars a lot. So therefore, I absorb those sugars and I start multiplying happily. So what is the stimulus here? Sugars. Is it a chemical stimulus? Ha. And what is the response? I start dividing and redividing out of my happiness. Sometimes there may be hormones. Say for example, in the presence of gibberellins, bolting occur. So what is the stimulus? Gibberellin. And what is the response? Bolting. That is the internodal length increase in a rosette plant. And what type of stimulus I call this as? It is not physical or chemical. I can better call it as physiological stimulus. So these are the points which I have written here, children. Physical stimulus could be light. Chemical stimulus, sugar, bacteria multiplying. Biological stimulus, hormones, and physiological effect. Next question. Are sense organs obligatory for consciousness? Absolutely not. Bacteria, tell me, where are sense organs in bacteria in order to show consciousness? So therefore, presence of sense organs is not obligatory. And here only I want to tell you about photoperiodism. Seasonal breeders require a specific light intensity in order to reproduce. That is said to be photoperiodism. Should never get confused between photoperiodism and phototropism. The bending of stem tip towards light is said to be phototropism. Seasonal breeders reproducing under particular light period is said to be photoperiodism. So remember these two important words. Now, photoperiod, that's what I have written here, affects reproduction in both plants and animals, which are seasonal breeders. Consciousness is to be aware of surroundings. Then what is the next important one? Self-consciousness. To be aware of themselves it is observed only in humans during highly developed cerebrum. It is not a defining feature. I always tell this simple example. If there is a suspicious object there, all right. So if I'm a dog trainer and I bring the dog and I'm going to stay far away from the suspicious object and send the dog. Look here, understand this. Both me, imagine I'm a dog trainer now, and the dog, both of them know that there is a suspicious object. Means both of them are aware of surroundings. It means that both of them are conscious. Then, being a human with a well-developed cerebrum, I understand the dangers of going there. Therefore, what do? I send the dog. I stay far away from there. So it means that I know not only about the surroundings, but also about myself. To know about the surroundings, both me and the dog know. Aware of myself is only I know, not my dog. So therefore, my dog is going to run and go and see the suspicious object. So this is a simple definition between consciousness and self-consciousness. I think you understood it thoroughly. Now, the most important one, this is the point. Both people who are in brain dead or in coma, there is a different opinion about this concept. Are they conscious? Means are they aware of surroundings? The answer is no. Are they self-conscious? Are they aware of themselves? The answer is no. So people who are brain dead or present in coma, they are not conscious and they are not even self-conscious. Then the most important part, interactions. Look here. A property appears when smaller components interact with each other. It is observed in all living organisms, and this emergent property is due to interactions. This is a very important point. So interactions can be among cells, interactions can be among chemicals. Simple example I'm going to give you. Say for example, I'm a chloroplast now. I have many enzymes and light, pigments. Mere presence of enzymes and pigments will not automatically qualify me to perform photosynthesis. I need to interact with each other. I need to interact with substrates. I need to interact with many compounds so as to perform photosynthesis. So the interaction among chemicals in chloroplast results in an emergent property called photosynthesis. Same way, the mere presence of cells is not going to determine the emergent property. It is the interaction among cells is responsible. So one neuron cannot really carry the signals. It is all the neurons in the neural system. One muscle cell cannot help in contraction. It is the combination of many cells. Simple way. If all the cells interact with each other, one trachea cannot conduct water. It is a combination of all the tracheids overlapping laterally. Combination of all the xylem vessels present one above the other is actually responsible for a property called conduction of water. All these examples properly signify that it is not the mere presence of cell, but interaction among cells results in emergent properties. It is not the mere presence of chemical, but interaction among chemicals is responsible for emergent properties. That's a very important point to remember. All right. Then I talked about biological organization works at these levels: molecules, organelles, cells, tissues. At each level, new properties appear because of interactions. Is it a defining property? The answer is yes. The same example which I've told you, children. A property of a tissue is not present in constituent cell, but due to the result of interaction among constituent cells. A muscle tissue can contract and produce movement, but a single muscle cell alone cannot produce the coordinated body movement. And a single vessel element cannot help in conduction of water. It is the presence of all the vessel elements present one above the other. Same way I talked about, the property of a cell organelle is not present in the molecular constituents of cell organelle, but arise due to interactions among molecular components in it. Example I told you, all the pigments and enzymes in chloroplast interact with each other, ultimately producing sugars by photosynthesis. Then the last important point, all present-day organisms share common genetic material, that is DNA, not only with each other, share common genetic material, and they resemble not only with each other but also with their ancestors and show some degree of variations. And the degree of variations is mostly because of mutations. All organisms placed in the same species need not share identical genome, as they show some genetic variations. And the last important point is self-organization. Living systems can arrange their components in ordered structure without any external direction. So molecules can organize into organelles, organelles organize into cells without any external direction, and cells organize into tissues and organs. Children, we are going to discuss a little bit about biodiversity, the second half of a living world. Look here. The estimated number of species is approximately around 7 million. You studied this in the zoology part, and the scientist's name, Robert Mayr. But out of 7 million species, how many species we were able to identify, give a name, and classify? If you look, it is only 1.7 to 1.8. It looks very less, isn't it? Why like that? Because we as humans couldn't explore into new areas yet. So can I say that taxonomy looks a very much unfinished science? Absolutely correct. Because there are many species which need to be identified, given a name, and grouped as such. Now, there is two types of classifications. Earliest classification is classification of organisms based on utility. Say, for example, if I'm a Stone Age man, these plants are useful, so I used to grow them, I used to carry them. These plants are unuseful, I need to ignore them. So this is also a type of classification. Having said that, it is not based on science. The first scientific classification was reported by Aristotle. He took the external characters, nature of stem, as a criteria for classifying plants into herbs, shrubs, and trees. Then Linnaeus took one of the character, like the cell wall, presence or absence of cell wall, of categorizing the living organisms into plants and animals, two kingdoms. Then you have Whitaker's classification, Karl Voss classification, Bentham and Hooker classification, where he looked not only all the morphological characters, he took the internal characters, anatomy, cell biology, as a criteria for classifying. That is said to be natural system. And the last one is phylogenetic system, where we also take the evolutionary relationships as a criteria. Engler and Prandtl's classification, even Whitaker's classification come under phylogenetic classification. Anyway, we'll be discussing that in detail in the next chapter. Your textbook says that the taxonomic studies not only allow us to group them properly, such that our reading becomes easy, Taxonomic studies also have one important utility. They may be useful in agriculture, forestry, and also knowing our bioresources and their diversity. Remember this? This statement is given in the summary part of your textbook. Now, what are the basis for taxonomy? Look here. If there is one species which is yet to be identified, first I need to identify them. Taxonomic aids can help me to identify. Then I need to name it, nomenclature. Then I need to group it in one particular group based on similarities and dissimilarities. So characterization, identification, nomenclature, and classification are the different steps in taxonomy. Remember that. Now, then there is always a confusion with the word taxonomy and systematics. What is the difference? Look here. I'm a human being. So human being is given a name, Homo sapiens, and they're grouped. So that is said to be taxonomy, isn't it? Then what is systematics? How it is related to primates? What is the evolutionary tree? That is said to be systematics. Isn't it true that systematics is a broader word than taxonomy? Taxonomy talks only about classification and nomenclature, whereas systematics talks about grouping based on evolutionary criteria or phylogeny. So therefore, systematics talks about evolutionary criteria as well, unlike taxonomy, which is basically dealt with identification, classification, and nomenclature. The term systematics is derived from a Latin word. Systema means regular arrangement. Systema Naturae is a book written by Linnaeus. You heard about that. And even Species Plantarum is also a book written by Linnaeus. And assigning name Mangifera indica and classifying Mangifera indica is a job of taxonomy. But showing mango's relation with other plants via evolutionary tree is systematics. I took an example from animals. This is an example from plants. Now, identification of an organism. I told you, first step for us is identifying an organism. How to identify? There should be some taxonomic aids we take into criteria. These are the taxonomic aids for plants. And one disclaimer, this is not a part of our NEET syllabus, but just nothing wrong in reading 2 or 3 statements more. Look here, reading the known statements again and again sometimes is very futile. All right, so just increasing a little bit of circumference here and there, it's not a bad idea, especially when you're writing this exam one more time. Every question matters. Even if they go outside the purview of the NCERT book, you should be able to remember. Anyhow, we have some time. So therefore, 1 or 2 points here I'll tell you. Taxonomic aids for plants, herbarium, botanical garden, and flora. These are used only for plants. Taxonomic aids exclusive for animals is zoological parks. All right, this ex situ and in situ is a very popular question in NEET with regard to from zoology. Next, taxonomic aids for both plants and animals, all M's. Museums, manuals, monographs, and catalog. What this taxonomic aids will help? It helps us to identify. Imagine I found out a plant. Is it already identified or not? That can be known by comparing it with the herbarium, comparing it with the flora. So basically, taxonomic aids help in identification of an organism. Then comes the most important step, nomenclature. On 3rd of May, you have seen one question coming from nomenclature. And not only 3rd of May, children, in the last 5 or 6 years, the most important and the fertile region of this chapter is the ICBN principles. That was very popular part. Again, so be careful and see that you read this little more attentively. Naming of plants, polynomial nomenclature. Previously, a single plant was given many names, many Latin words. That was very difficult for anyone to remember. So therefore, then binomial nomenclature, naming of plants in 2 words. It was Linnaeus who for the first time implemented binomial nomenclature. First of all, why we should give a name? If it is a common name throughout the world, it's very easy to communicate. So that is the reason one name, scientific name for a particular plant is always needed, because that helps us to communicate in a better possible way. So polynomial, many Latin words, binomial, 2 Latin words. And the architect here was Linnaeus. Then Linnaeus is no more. and there are many plants which are identified after him. So therefore, there should be some set rules on which we have to classify plants and animals. International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, the full form may be a good question. And for animals, it is ICZN. All right. Now, what are the basic principles of nomenclature, ICBN rules? All right. First is, it should be in 2 words. The language normally should be Latin because it's a dead language, no changes. Then it is printed in italics. All right, to explain Latin origin and to distinguish with other words. Look here, a paragraph is there and one scientific name is there. If it is printed in italics, it clearly says that this is a scientific name, unlike the remaining words in that paragraph. So, printing in italics surely helps us to understand that this is a scientific name and is derived from a Latin origin. When handwritten, imagine if I'm writing Mangifera indica, what should I do? All right, I should write Mangifera indica and should underline both Mangifera indica separately. Right. Then, genus name should be in capital letter and should be a noun form. Species name should be a small letter and should be an adjective form. Scientist name, very important. Look here, it is not a universal rule that you have to write the scientist name after the species name. Of course, it is written in some, but it is not a universally accepted one. So in the sense, it is not obligatory to write the scientific name. That's a point which I want to tell you. Surely, scientist name should start with a capital letter, but it should not be written in italics. It should not be printed in italics, and it should not be underlined, and should be in abbreviated form, short form. All right. So then we talk about the most important one, that is called classification. When we talk about classification, children, one word which normally bothers you is, what is the difference between taxonomic category and taxon? Strictly speaking, if I talk about the NCERT language, there is absolutely no difference. They have actually used these 2 words very loosely. Taxonomic category, rank, taxon, they are one and the same. But let us talk about what is realistic, what is correct. Taxonomic category is a rank in the classification system in which organisms are grouped based on similarities / dissimilarities. So now you understood. Taxonomic category is the rank in the classification system in which organisms are grouped. Then what is taxon? Taxon is actual group of organisms placed in taxonomic category. Actual group of organisms which are placed in taxonomic category are called taxon. And the rank in the classification system in which organisms are grouped are said to be taxonomic category. If still there is confusion between these 2, the best way to get rid of this confusion is talk about one example corresponding to it. Let us look here. For example, mammalia. All right, mammalia is actually a group of organisms. So therefore, it's a taxon and it is kept under a category called class. Same way, Felidae, it is a taxon and it is kept under category called family. Isn't it? Say for example, family is a taxonomic category. Solanaceae is a taxon. Dolichos lab is taxon, genus Dolichos, and species Dolichos lab is said to be taxon. So now you understood. Taxonomic categories are 7. They include kingdom, division, class, order, family, genus, and species. Their actual rank in which the organisms are kept, those are called taxonomic categories. Then what are taxons? The organisms which are kept in these are called taxons. Clear? I think it's very clear. Now, the next important one. This is one more area, children, from where the questions come. Higher the taxonomic category, greater is the difficulty of determining the relationships to other taxa of the same level. Hence, classification becomes more complex. Yes. Say, for example, plant kingdom. plant kingdom include organisms from alga to angiosperms, highly diversified. When they're highly diversified, then it is very difficult, all right, in grouping them, isn't it? But when we talk about Solanaceae, a family, all the members shows many morphological similarities. So when I go to species, it's more easier because all the organisms under this shows maximum morphological similarities. So when I move from kingdom to species, the number of common characters will increase. Then it's more easier for a taxonomist to group them in different categories. Conversely, when I move from species to kingdom, the number of common characters is going to decrease. When the number of common characters decrease, the criteria or the grouping of organisms becomes a little more difficult or complex. This point is very important. All right. Then, look here, as we move from higher to lower taxa, organisms share more detailed similarities, making classification more easier. Then, let us talk about some lower categories, means taxonomic categories, and higher taxonomic categories. If you talk about lower taxonomic categories like genus, family, organisms are grouped based on many specific and detailed similarities, isn't it? Because there are many common characters like morphology, physiology, genetics, reproductive features, etc. Plants kept under family Fabaceae share many similar characters. They all have papilionaceous corolla. They all have 10 stamens, diadelphic. They all have marginal placentation. They all have a fruit called legume. They all have a seed which is non-endospermic. They all have a pulvinous leaf base. They all contain nodular roots. So there are many similarities, all right, with regard to the plants kept under the family. In higher categories, now let us talk about higher categories starting from order, class, division, etc. Organisms are more diverse when you placed under these categories. So naturally, when they are diverse, they are going to share lesser similar characters, fewer similar characters. So instead of detailed similarities, classification is based on aggregate, means overall or broader characters. This point is important. Say, for example, I give an example because examples can help you to understand this concept. Division angiosperms include all flowering plants. These plants differ greatly in their habit, trees, shrubs, but they share the general features of producing flowers and seeds enclosed in fruit. So that is the reason why we say that from order and higher taxonomic categories, aggregate of characters are taken as a criteria because they share fewer similarities. That's the point which you have to remember. Knowledge of characters of an organism or a group of organisms is the basic requirement for placement of an organism in various categories. Okay, next one. Taxonomic, this is one word. This is one word. You should be careful not to mess up with it. All right. Taxonomic categories are distinct biological entities and are not mere morphological aggregates. So what is the point here? Listen, taxonomic categories means kingdom, class, division, genus, order are distinct biological entities and not mere morphological aggregates. Means the organisms kept under these categories, they are not only showing the morphological similarities, but every organism is a distinct biological entity. All right, that is the meaning of it. All right, say for example, fish, and let us take a whale. Fish and whale, both of them stay in water, both of them look alike, but they are not kept in the same group. Pisces, mammals. Why like that? Because there is some distinct biological characters are taken into criteria. So if you take that as a criteria, then both of them are diverse with regard to their characters. So if you take just morphological characters as a criteria, then both fish and whale should be in the same group. So it's very clear that they are separated because of other very distinct biological characters. Say for example, Solanum and Datura. They share a lot of similar characters. They all have bicarpellary syncarpous ovary. They all have 5 stamens, epipetalous. They all have fused petals. They all have sepals which are persistent. So it means that they are morphological aggregates under the family, under the taxonomic category called family. But Datura and Solanum are distinct with regard to their own characters. Datura have funnel-shaped corolla, unlike Solanum, which contain rotate or wheel-shaped corolla. Datura shows solitary terminal inflorescence, unlike Solanum, which shows monocaseal scorpioid sign. So it means that not only organisms kept under family Solanaceae, these two organisms, no doubt they share morphological similarities, which I've listed. All right, but at the same time, every plant, that is Datura and Solanum, are distinct biological entity having some distinct characters of its own. That is a point which you have to remember with regard to this. So organisms are grouped not only because they look similar, but more because they share evolutionary history, genetic makeup, and biological properties. Classification is not just how organisms look, but it is about their biological relationships. That's a point which is important. Two animals may look similar, but belong to different biological group. I was talking about whale and fish. They look similar. Here I gave dolphin, but similar, but shape. But dolphins are mammals, not fish. This shows taxonomy consider deeper biological characters, not just morphology. This is not mentioned in your NCERT book, but subspecies, subgenus, series, suborder, tribe. All right, even a domain in Calvo's classification, three kingdom classification. They're all taxonomic categories, but they are not obligate, compulsory taxonomic categories. Taxonomic categories obligate are only 7. Here I want to talk about taxonomic hierarchy. Species, genus, family, order, class, division, provided if it is plant, phylum, provided if it is animal, and kingdom. This is said to be taxonomic hierarchy. All right, taxonomic hierarchy starts with species, ends with kingdom. But nothing wrong in saying taxonomic hierarchy in a descending order starts with kingdom and ends with species. Okay, the first one looks more correct when compared to second, but second is not incorrect. Then we talk about the species. A group of organisms with maximum morphological similarities and which can freely interbreed by sexual reproduction is said to be species. It is the lowest taxonomic category. Individual shows maximum similarities. The second word in binomial naming is species. It should start with a capital letter. Ernst Mayr, he proposed the concept of species. And some of the examples of species I gave: Mangifera indica, mango; Triticum aestivum; Panthera leo; Panthera tigris; Panthera pardus; Solanum nigrum, McCoy; Solanum melongena, brinjal; Solanum tuberosum, potato; Musca domestica, housefly; Homo sapiens, humans. They're all examples of species. And mind you, species is the only existential taxon. The remaining ones, genus, family, they're all human constructs. They're not existential. If you ask me, show me the family, I can't show. But if you ask me, show me the species, I can. All right, so the existential form is species. The remaining categories are human constructs, is an important point to note. And mules, worker bees, liger, members of Deuteromycetes are strictly not species. Why? Because they cannot show sexual reproduction or they cannot freely interbreed. If a genus have more than one species, they represent different organisms. They have more morphological similarities in comparison to two species of different genera. Okay, I'll give an example. Solanum tuberosum and Solanum lycopersicon. Solanum tuberosum is potato, Solanum lycopersicon is tomato. Now, these two have the common genus, Solanum. So, therefore, the similarities are more between potato and tomato in comparison to potato vis-a-vis datura or tomato along or versus datura. So, what I mean to say is that two species of same genus share more similarities than two species of two different genera. So therefore, that's an important point you have to remember. Reproductive isolation, not that much important. Now, species, I told you, it is only the real and existential form. Coming to the genus, it includes closely related species showing many common characters. It starts with a capital letter. It represents the first word in binomial name. So look here, Mangifera, Triticum, Panthera, Solanum, Felis, Canis, Homo. They're all examples of genus. Two species of same genus show more similarities than the two species of different genera. I think I was just explaining the same example. Brinjal and potato resemble more to each other than to datura. Then coming to family. Now, what is the meaning of family? It is a group of different genera or related genera that share important structural similarities. And remember, plant families ends with AC, Solanaceae, Liliaceae, Malvaceae, Asteraceae. And animal families ends with day, Felidae, Canidae, Muscidae. All right, so the animal families ends with day. That's an important point to remember. All right. At higher levels like family, one trait is not reliable. So they represent artificial grouping of diverse organisms as they may differ widely in morphology, anatomy, and physiology. So taxonomists consider a combination of many traits or aggregate of characters for classification. This point we already discussed. All right, mango belongs to family Anacardiaceae. Wheat belongs to family Poaceae. Brinjal, tomato, McCoy, and potato belongs to family Solanaceae. And lion, tiger, leopard, and cat belongs to Felidae. Dog belongs to Canidae. Humans belong to family Hominidae. Housefly, Mucidae. And sweet potato, Convolvulaceae. Here in NCERT book there is given that order Polymoniales include Solanaceae and Convolvulaceae. All right, based mostly on the floral characters. So Convolvulaceae one example for that is sweet potato. Members of one plant family differ from other in vegetative and reproductive characters. This point was the point I was referring to. Plant families Convolvulaceae and Solanaceae are included under Polymoniales, mostly on the floral characters, because floral characters are mostly conserved. All right, they are stable, unlike the vegetative characters which get modified depending on the environment. Now, what are the genera kept under Solanaceae? Solanum, Withania, Petunia, Datura. And what are the genera kept under Felidae? Cat, tiger, lion, leopard. Then what is the next one? Order. It includes one or more related families. Mango belongs to order Sapindales. Wheat belongs to order Poales. Potato and sweet potato belongs to order Polymoniales. Housefly belong to order Diptera. Humans belong to order Primata. Cats, lion, and dog belongs to order Carnivora. All right, these are the points with regard to order. Then we talk about class. A group of related orders is called class. Organisms kept under class mammals, monkeys, gorilla, gibbon, tiger, cat, dog, they're all kept under class Mammalia. And under class dicots, Anacardiaceae, Leguminosae, Solanaceae, Convolvulaceae, Anacardiaceae, they're all the examples which are kept under class dicots, and mango belongs to Anacardiaceae family. Class monocots include Liliaceae, Poaceae, Orchidaceae. They're all monocot families. Then we talk about division or phyla. An aggregate of class is called division. Division is a taxon, not taxon actually, taxonomic category exclusive for plants. Phylum is a taxonomic category exclusive for animals. Mango and wheat belongs to division Angiosperms. Humans, belong to phylum Chordata, and housefly belongs to phylum Arthropoda. You know all this. From species to kingdom, similarities decrease, diversity increase, classification becomes more complex. And the last part of this biodiversity is what is called the classification of mango. Kingdom Plantae, division, better word is division, Angiosperms, class Dicots, order Sapindales, family Anacardiaceae, genus Mangifera, species Mangifera indica. Then if you talk about wheat, Kingdom Plantae, then division Angiosperms, class Monocots, order Poales, family Poaceae, genus is Triticum, species is Triticum aestivum.